Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly stream here on the One Human History channel. We have Connor with us today.
What's up, everyone? How are you?
It's good to see you here, Connor, and we expect
Yeah,
to see
dude.
Connor here on the reg. This is kind of a two-man stream now. We may have more guests in the future to add, and maybe from time to time one of us will be absent and someone else will take our place, but this is pretty much the crew. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And we have decided that we're going to spend the next bunch of streams really focusing in on Trump's presidency and trying to give you a sort of neutral, what we say, independent perspective, a nonpartisan perspective on Donald Trump and his impact on the presidency as a whole by looking at what goes on each week. So we're not going to be a either MAGA Trump supporting show where we talk about how everything Trump does is 12-dimensional chess and this is why he's going to best all his enemies and make America great again. But we're also not going to be one of these hysterical left-wing or liberal podcasts that just says, "Oh my God, did you see Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible when
Yeah.
he swore in? Clearly, he's the devil." We're just going to focus on presidential leadership, Trump's decisions, and its impact on his ability to get his agenda done, and the office of the presidency going forward. So, with that in mind, first of all, Connor, do you agree to those parameters?
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited for it. I will do my best to say just tell it like it is, Johnny, and make sure that we're not editorializing too much.
This is going to be the era of common sense for one human history. Okay, so with that in
The
mind,
greatest era.
what are we going to talk about today, Connor?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're going to talk about is Trump's executive orders. He went through. Oh my goodness, how many? I have it right here. Tracking Trump's executive orders from CNN. He did 54 executive orders so far. It's been a week. So what are the ones that kind of caught your eye, Johnny?
So a lot of different ones caught my eye. I definitely was very interested in Trump's orders on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI.
Hmm.
I think this has a lot larger implications for the role of federal government in enforcing equal rights and civil rights, which has been an old question. You know, how active should the government be in enforcing equality? Is equality something, the founders believed, at least according to the Declaration of Independence, that equality was something that God gave us. Obviously, they didn't believe it was something that we could have without fighting for it because they fought a revolutionary war and they created a government that had powers, uh, but those powers were generally weak when it came to the enforcement of civil rights or equality within the country. And that changed with time during the Civil War, in particular, with the passage of the 14th Amendment. And that was the first time that a president said, okay, we are going to actively pursue the racial disparities, the sort of it's disparities in equality. So the government is going to be responsible for ensuring that, in this case, African American people are treated with respect and dignity and get the opportunity to participate in society. That was a huge change from the original mission of the founding fathers, who were constantly trying to hamstring government and prevent government intervention.
Hmm.
Uh, and President Trump has taken sort of more the side of the founders. He reversed 78 of Biden's executive orders, including many on DEI. And I think I have the first one here. The first, let me share it actually. The first order that Trump rescinded on DEI. Let's see. Share that. So this was Joe Biden's executive order of June 30th, 2021.
Hmm.
So actually, this wasn't the one I wanted, but it's fine. It works. This was a later executive order that Joe Biden signed, part of his DEI initiative. He also, the first thing that the first thing that Trump canceled was just a general sort of, it is a general executive order in which Biden said it will be the responsibility of the federal government to ensure that the government and the workforce in general observes and promotes diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So I guess my first question is to you. How do you feel about the idea on the original
Mm.
executive order signed by Biden that the government has a responsibility to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility?
Well, um, I think it is important to make sure that you don't have the same voices in an echo chamber. Um, Hello, Nixon.
Hi, Mr.
Um,
We're
I
being
think
taped. That means we're being taped.
we're we are definitely being recorded.
Yeah.
Um, I I think when you have the same group of people ruling or even working in an area for the same for a really long time, you get a, the same sort of um like actions. I don't know the best way to describe this, but if you have the same people working in the same roles, the same culture takes place on what does get done, maybe what doesn't get paid attention to, or uh, how seriously something is taken, which I know is very broad, but I think it is important to have different types of people working in roles and to try to promote uh, if you have the same candidates, if there's two people that are essentially the same, generally the person who's going to get the job is the person who looks more like or acts more like the people who already have the job, and that promotes the same types of people getting the same types of jobs, especially if a lot of people have been excluded, a lot of minority races, or not generally not a lot of white males have worked in the government, so it promotes people acting a different way, or maybe that's not the exact way to say it, but
You mean you're saying basically like if let's say I'm a boss at a like one of those Wolf of Wall Street type of places,
yes,
and I just sort of always hire the same like white guy with slick
frat
back hair,
bros, yeah,
right? And so most of my staff looks the same, and
yeah,
I'm not going to do anything to change that. And maybe there's a qualified black woman who comes in and applies, but I just sort of look at her and go, well, she doesn't look like Leonardo DiCaprio, so that's not quite, from the central casting perspective, she doesn't quite fit the bill. And everything she tells me, as good as it sounds, I'm sort of thinking, but she's a black woman, therefore she couldn't possibly be as good as some, young white guy. But
yeah,
what the DEI sort of program forces that boss to do is say, oh, damn it, I need to hire 10 black women this month, or I'm not going to hit my DEI requirements. So I'll hire, 5 or 3 black women to instead of 3 Leonardo DiCaprio clones. And that is supposed to equal the playing field and help black women sort of get their foot in the door and participate.
yeah. And I think that is helpful. Um,
Mhm.
and does it suck to lose out on a job? Absolutely. Especially if you feel like you're qualified, and if you had like, I don't know, a lot of the way that I've gotten jobs, and in the industry that I'm in, the service industry, you get jobs from recommendations. You meet someone from another person. And like that's how a lot of people get jobs. So if a lot of people are getting jobs from meeting people, if you have different types of people in the office, you can have different types of people fitting a similar vibe at least. So they come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, they have maybe slightly different cultures, and that can give you a more well-rounded look on things. Sound when someone goes in and goes like, you're not going to get a job because you're a white male, and there's two, and they don't like white males, like I think that's like an easy way of putting blame
Hmm.
on pretending like I only didn't get the job because I'm a white male, or I didn't get into that college because I'm a white male, instead of being like, realistically, it's just not as easy and streamlined. So I do think it's
Hmm.
nice. I think it's like a good thing to work towards. And at some point, I'm sure it will hit, I don't want to say like a limit, but like hopefully you get enough types of people where you don't have to pay attention to
Hmm.
needing to hire different people or people
What do
who
you
are
think about
underrepresented.
what do you think about this idea? I mean, of that diversity is a strength because um, in an example I gave, the Wolf of Wall Street
Hmm.
example, certainly by having a DEI quota, it will help three black women, let's say, get a job
Sure.
that they wouldn't have gotten without the DEI. But what what does that do for racial equality? Like we know it helps those three specific
Hmm.
individuals advance their careers, but
I mean,
a
I
what
yeah.
what does it really do to? I mean, what does it do to advance racial equality to have three black women be ruthless Wall Street wolves instead of three Leonardo DiCaprio clones?
I mean, well, when to that example, I worked in sales. I worked in sales in DC, where there was probably mm, there's probably less white people working in sales than there probably half. There's probably half or less of white people. My boss was black. A lot of the people I worked with were black. Um, and I think that was like, oh, because it was DC, so there's more black people than anything else, than any other race of person. But I think for those people, like it gives them the ability to be as ruthless and garbage as a white person, which I think is funny, to invite other types of people to be soulless, capitalistic, boring people. But I was on the first sales team I was on was like mostly white people. And there was definitely like this bratty bro culture where they all kind of like tended to look towards the top most annoying bro guy to set the tone for how we talked to customers, how we acted, how long your lunch break was, if you went out for beers after, if you blew 3,000 bucks at the MGM that weekend to go hang out with the boys,
Hmm.
if someone else helped you with a deal because they were all on the same team, sort of thing. So like I think it's a slow trickle where there's more and more of a type of person that knows that they can do a job because they see other people doing the job.
Hmm.
I think like representation, or like seeing yourself represented, is more of a subconscious thing than a conscious thing. But I don't know. There's a million white people doing a million things. Um, but like I think you see in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, anyone can do this job. It's not just for this person. And I think it takes a while for that to kick in.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think like
yeah,
it's definitely a complicated issue. I think there are certain situations where diversity is clearly a strength. For example, I think DEI is great for the State Department, the diplomatic corps of the United States, which should present a diverse group of individuals. And
sure.
actually, this is a controversy within the State Department because a lot of people quit the State Department because they feel their racial characteristics determine where they get sent. So
Oh,
black diplomats will get sent to Africa way more often than white ones will. Now, I I get it. I get the frustration, obviously, when it's your career and you're like, but I studied
yeah.
Germanic languages and I would be a great diplomat in Sweden, except you don't want to send me there. You want to send me to Ghana instead, where I have no knowledge. I'm just black. So I get that. But I also think that it's good for the State Department to tap the resources of the immigrant communities that have
Sure.
experience. So if you're, if you're the kind of person who wears a hijab, you might have a job in the Middle East. It might be good it's good diplomacy to have like a lot of women in hijabs at the American embassy. Not
Yes.
such a good job, not such good diplomacy in other countries where there's higher rates of, discomfort with Muslims. That's just the racist nature of diplomacy. Sorry, but in other fields, where diversity, equity, and inclusion would certainly help minority communities or individuals from minority communities get involved, and that might
Hmm.
ripple to the culture. But at the same time, I'm not comfortable with the United States government taking such an active role in going into businesses and essentially saying, here's one more thing that you guys have to add to your hiring process
Yeah.
that scientifically we can't really prove it's going to improve your business, because just because you hired a person of this race doesn't mean that person's going to bring like diversity to the table. Like,
Yeah.
just because you hired a black person doesn't mean they're coming in and like black culture just like infuses the entire operation.
No, they're just a human being.
Yes. And it creates a dynamic that automatically is going to lead to resentment on the part of anyone who doesn't get hired
Hmm.
because somebody got the DEI spot. So I think that DEI has its uses and its places. I just think that Biden was too aggressive in trying to
Sure.
turn the entire country into DEI, to make the entire country sort of conform to DEI. I also think that there are a lot of grifters who make a lot of money. And I saw this in organizations I worked with, where the CEO dumps a huge portion of the budget to hire some weirdos to come and give these like new agey sort of racial sensitivity trainings that are supposed to like, I worked in an anti-slavery museum and they were teaching us about white supremacy as if we were like as if we were the people who like knew best about the history of it.
That's
And
so
so,
funny.
and it was a huge portion of our budget that they spent on this. And it was like,
And it's
why are
probably
you
given from
doing
them. It's
this?
probably some of it's probably given from the government. It's probably they have the budget there because it's forced, or because it's money like a tax break or a write off or
Yeah,
something like that.
sure. And so my I would call myself a DEI skeptic who is not completely against the idea of taking into account these factors in the hiring
Hmm.
process. I just think that it's not for every sphere, it's not for every sector. It's not a panacea, and it doesn't fix the problems that it purports to fix, except in a very sort of individualized case by case way.
Sure.
So, on that note, do you happen to know what Trump has done in place of reversing Biden's DEI order?
All right. So this is what I've heard and what I've read. But I haven't heard anything from our friends who are in DC. I haven't seen any of these repercussions, but I've heard that he is going after people who were potential DEI hires and telling people it's kind of like a red scare almost, where it's like, do you know someone who's a DEI hire? You better tell us. Like we are, he. It is said that he has been going after people who were DEI hires to remove them from their positions.
So you think this could have like a McCarthy effect where it's like we're purging,
Kind
like
of.
purge? Yeah, not
Yeah.
crazy about purges for sure.
No.
But at the same time, if Trump really wants to root out DEI, he can't do it by just letting everyone who has the privileges of DEI just sit tight and where they are, because people who are involved with DEI
Hmm.
they, in my experience with people who've involved in DEI, they really believe in it. Like they really think that DEI is the next like civil rights fight, and they will go down fighting for sure. Unless Trump takes if he wants to do this, and he doesn't take an aggressive stance in like rooting it out, he's not going to really get rid of it. I think it'll just sort of be like he'll pass this executive order and be like, DI is wrong, and then
And then that's it.
it'll just continue to happen. So, for his purposes, it makes sense for him to be aggressive, in my opinion.
We
All
have
right.
friends in the government, and I haven't heard anything. So once I hear, I am so interested in anecdotal evidence. It's not even funny. I want to know what happened, and I almost only the news is so uh the news is so biased, but it's so like on its own thing and repeating all the same news stories that other news outlets are saying. That honestly, if a friend isn't telling it to me, I'll wait till a friend does.
Okay, that's an interesting approach.
Yeah, it's the
Um,
wrong approach, but it's my approach.
so, all right. Well, why don't I turn it over to you for the next part and have
Okay.
you tell us what's one Trump executive order that you found particularly fascinating, transformative? Go for it.
I think this is one that I haven't really heard much about. So that's what caught my eye. It's something that we haven't really talked about in a long time. And it's the executive order restoring the death penalty and protecting public safety. Um,
Ooh.
I found it interesting that corporal punishment is something that Trump is going back after. He says in section 1, capital punishment is an essential tool for deterring and punishing those who commit the most heinous crimes and acts of lethal violence against American citizens. I feel like corporal punishment has been outlawed by almost every state. I think Texas still has it. Lethal injection is still around in a few places, but like, uh, I remember doing a report in college, learning that it's more expensive. Like when people are saying, well, it's cheaper just to kill someone and they're going to be gone anyway, but it's more expensive to have someone continuously going in and going through their case and trying to rebut it and find that they're innocent because they're about to die. um, that costs the taxpayers more money. And also, these drugs cost a ridiculous amount to put into someone. Um, and I think it's a weird thing to be one of your initial executive orders. And it worries me that he is looking at for profit prisons type of deal. Because going into any of that stuff is, yeah, that's the exact page I'm on. Going into um starting off as an executive order where he's like, I'm going to go right in on a death penalty is a little odd to me. Well, I mean, what do you think about it?
Well, I would say I'm not a fan of capital punishment personally. I don't think I mean, when you're talking it's just to me like it's hard to support death penalty when you're talking about such a small number of people being executed. There's such a large number of people who, if you have a death penalty, would deserve it, but only
Sure,
a tiny, tiny fraction of those people actually get the death penalty. And a lot of times the people who get the death penalty didn't do as nearly bad of crimes as some of the people who did. Like you can get the death
sure.
penalty for one murder, and then there's a serial killer somewhere in another state who's just like, fine, he's not going to the chair. Um,
Yeah,
so it's so weirdly applied as for something as serious as like taking a human life, in that organized way where it's like we officially approve murdering this person and then shuffling them into a room and like picking a time and like murdering them. Like I mean,
at 3:02 tomorrow.
it's very strange. Like as opposed to sort of like you go to war with somebody and you
Yeah,
shoot the enemy, or even just like even a battlefield like sort of execution that one army commits against a group of people that it's just like, we can't march any further with them. All right, just shoot him. Or he disobeyed orders, shoot him. But like to have the whole state to sort of be like, we're gonna have this big show where we kill a murderer, and it's supposed to make people afraid to commit crimes in the future, which I mean, I've never heard of the idea.
Can you imagine?
If you're like at the point where you're gonna kill somebody,
I might get in trouble. Like,
right,
come
on. You're either not thinking clearly you're not thinking far enough ahead to care about the death penalty, or you maybe made a calculation in your head where you're like, I have to kill this person. Doesn't matter if I get executed. But who's like in this situation where they're like, I'm gonna kill somebody, and then they'll be like, but I could get executed. So as opposed to I could end up spending my whole life in jail. So, and I also just sort of think that like, isn't capital punishment state by state? So,
well, so here's a quote from him. Seeking the overruling of the Supreme Court precedents that hinder capital punishment. The Attorney General shall take all appropriate action to seek the overruling of the Supreme Court precedents that limit the authority of state and federal governments to impose capital punishment. So he's trying to rewrite the whole thing.
Well, it seems like President Biden issued a moratorium on federal executions. Yes. And so he's reversing that moratorium, which, you know, it's not an issue that I support. I don't support the death penalty, but from the perspective of like, if I'm somebody who believes in the death penalty, then I'd say I'm within my rights as president to sort of overturn a moratorium on something.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many other things to worry about. There's so many more important issues, which is why I found this interesting. There's a lot of the executive orders, which are kind of just like things that he would have talked about on the campaign trail or things that are clearly in the news. This just struck me as I haven't talked about this since college, or like I haven't heard people talking about capital punishment since college. Though it does, you know, Biden did run on anti-death, an anti-death penalty. He's an anti-death candidate. But like I found it very interesting that he's going straight after an older Republican talking point that I don't remember him talking about on the campaign trail at all.
Well, you know, I'm trying to get this bigger so you can actually see it. I guess my most sort of apolitical, setting aside my own personal feelings, take is that if the states if the states wanted to execute these criminals, some of whom are terrible, like, okay, this is Trump's description in the executive order: remorseless criminals who brutalized young children, strangled and drowned their victims, and hunted strangers for sport. As I said, often the people who get executed are not as bad as some of the people who should be. But if these states are like, in my opinion, if a state decides that it wants to execute somebody who's gone through the court system, I don't think the president should stick his nose in and give a blanket like, no, nobody, everybody stop, no one can do, like, that's really going to piss off the states, because they're literally like, we have determined that this guy has to go. And instead, Biden was sort of saying like, no, you have to keep this person. You have to like pay for their prison stay. So I would be pissed off if I was a state and Biden put that moratorium, especially as he walked out the door, which I have to say, I don't want to be too like judgmental of presidents, because I don't want this to be that kind of channel, but super kind of like cowardly on Biden's part to drop this on the way out, knowing that Trump is just going to immediately overturn it. But I guess he thought like, well, at least there'll be a battle in the court over it.
Sure. I do think it's funny that you don't want to be judgmental of presidents, as our previous show was called Presidents Suck. But you know what, Johnny, you do you. I stand behind you.
I said that I didn't want this channel to be either hysterical Trump derangement or MAGA. Like, so I don't want to be like, this president, like Joe Biden, he's such a jerk. Everything he did to us, he's a horrible, disgusting, or like, President Trump, I say hate him. So he's a racist. That's not this channel.
Foaming at the mouth. Yeah.
So I feel bad being like, I don't want to just like use these sort of histrionic terms like President Biden's cowardly, I mean that's for Trump. That's his role. Okay.
What is your next thing that you've been paying attention to in regards to the whatchamacallits, the executive orders?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to find I'm such a freaking idiot because I keep picking these federal. I'm trying to find one of the ones that Trump reversed from Biden's first day in office, because
Okay.
the first day in office executive orders that Biden signed were the larger policies. And then as you go through the next months, you see that they were more specific. For example, DEI was first signed on January 20th. Biden said the federal government will take an active role in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then it was the executive order on hiring in the federal government and DEI. So how the federal government will be active in pursuing DEI. Then it was, encouraging businesses to, do DEI, or creating committees that will rate companies based on DEI, things like that. So it starts at the top, and then it as a general policy, and then it like trickles down to like these more specific orders. So this is one that Trump reversed of January 20th, 2021. And it is preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation.
Yeah, let's talk about this. This is something where at my job I work with comedians. Quite a few comedians were talking about this, and kind of how, because I know he talked about. He also said that like there's only going to be the gender that you're born as, and then a bunch of comedians went on stage and they're like, well, technically everyone's like a female for a while, so we're all
What?
women.
How's that?
Like the first few, look, I am certainly no doctor. I know so little about
After
biology.
that statement, I'm
One
certain you're
second,
not
what?
a doctor.
Everyone's phenotype at conception is female. Thank you so much. So look, I don't know, dude, but it was interesting that he was taking this much of a stance on the gender topic, to go so far as to say that. And this one is also, I mean, read to us that highlighted section, if you will.
Well, this was sort of where I thought a lot of the heat came on Biden. So we're looking at Biden's executive order to remind you guys that Trump rescinded. So every person should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to live without fear, no matter who they are or whom they love. Children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to restroom, locker room, or school sports. So, okay, to give a sort of broad view of what this is a cultural conflict executive order, in my opinion.
Yes.
What the issue of this order is that you have a president coming into office who is basically saying that the last president was a misogynist, that the last president was against women, and I not only am going to be for women, but I've even brought a woman on board as my vice president, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about Biden. I saw you do that. I'm saying this is Biden.
For a second, I thought you were saying that. As soon as you said a woman is vice president, I was like, oh, I thought you were like, nobody loves women like I love women. I thought that's what we were. I'm sorry.
So here's the thing. The order doesn't say combating discrimination on the basis of gender. It says combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity.
Mm,
And the problem is that when you're enforcing a law that is meant to balance the scales between men and women, but you've headlined it as gender identity instead of just gender or even sex, that means that you have basically said that any policy that our administration will take in the pursuit of women's rights will include trans women. And that obviously is the big issue for
yeah.
Trump and the MAGA crowd, because the implications are, let's say I'm creating an order that protects the right of women to have access to the restrooms, locker rooms, and school sports that they deserve. Well, I can't actually pass an executive order like that because my executive order is not based on protecting people based on their gender, but rather their gender identity. And so now that means that when I talk about protecting the restroom, it means that I'm not protecting a women's restroom from males. I'm protecting anyone who wants to use that restroom based on, whether they are women or men identifying as women or trans women or whatever the case may be. And so automatically, by protecting under the guise of protecting women, I'm contributing to the politicization of these spaces, the politicization of the restroom, the locker room, the school sports, which automatically meant people were going to be pissed off that men would be playing women's sports, men would be changing in women's locker rooms, men would be peeing and pooping in women's restrooms. So,
uh-huh. You can just say using. You
right.
didn't need to.
So we're trying to give the broad strokes here, folks, and like explain the culture war and not
Got to
try
get
to
into the specifics of what people are doing in the bathroom.
right. But this order doesn't say anything about protecting women. And that was another issue for the Biden administrations. They couldn't really say we're protecting women because that phrase was co-opted by the right wing as a phrase, as an anti-trans movement phrase. Protect women from trans men, or protect women from trans women, i.e. males who change their gender. And so they couldn't do anything to protect women or anything for women's rights. They could only do rights for women and all those other categories of people who are currently who have been for the last 8 years identifying as women publicly and being recognized to some degree as women. So obviously Trump overturned this. One of the first ones he overturned, because Trump cannot, he cannot, like from his perspective and the perspective people support him, Trump cannot allow a government policy whereby the protection of women cannot be exclusively for the protection of females, i.e. people with the people of the female sex. That whenever I want to protect people of the female sex, I must include anyone who identifies as that gender, which automatically brings up culture conflicts, including like who gets to use a women's restroom, who gets to change in front of my daughter, and who is going to be in the boxing ring with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
That boxing thing was a real big issue. And now I don't even know if it really got resolved. But yeah, I don't have more to say on that. I don't know why I trailed on. I was about to trail off. I'm not getting involved in the boxing thing. I have another executive order on Trump that has gone right against what Biden had done. May I read to you the Biden executive order?
Can you actually? Would you be able to text it to me real quick so I could open it here and have the viewers see it?
Yeah, yeah. Can I do I'll do it on Instagram. Does that work for you?
Yeah, 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 that's fine.
So I'll send you this article that I'm uh on Biden's, and then I'll do it to and then I'll do Trump's. Okay, this is to you. Also, I'm just while we're doing this, I would like to tell the people this is Biden's first. I would like to tell the people that I got a real silly one to end. A real silly Donald Trump executive order to take us home.
Okay, we've got
So and there's two Donald Trump executive
we've
orders
got
that are
20 we've got 20
going
minutes
with this.
left,
Okay.
and I want to make sure that we talk about that we rate Trump's
Oh,
first.
geez, there's that. I also had a real quick thing, but maybe we'll save that for next week, or maybe we'll save it for one of our YouTube shorts. You guys should check out our YouTube shorts. We're posting pretty often, about
Yeah,
once a day, during the weekdays, and we're looking for your opinions on what we're talking about as well. And did
yeah,
we miss anything? Maybe we missed something. So let us know in the comments below the videos. But this is about Biden on December 8th, 2021, signed an executive order uh, on catalyzing clean energy industries and jobs through federal sustainability. Now, we know that Trump in his first term took us out of the Paris Accords. Um, and so Biden's reversal of Trump taking us out of the Paris Accords was to be more carbon efficient, 100% zero emission vehicles, acquisitions by 2035. I think we all remember, like, you okay? Sorry. No, no, no. But I think my girlfriend just cut herself while doing stuff. She's
oh,
fine though. Anyway, it was about net zero emissions for businesses. We wanted to make sure that we were following the Paris Accords. We wanted to make sure that the cars moving forward were cleaner. We want to make sure that the businesses were using more um, um, energy efficient I don't know, things in their buildings, I guess, like lights and better AC units and what have you. There's way more to it, and I'm not an expert, but that was a big focus on the Biden administration because I feel like during the pandemic we all had to sit down with kind of all that we had been doing. We had nothing to do, so we got to see all of the, like, nature is healing, and like all of the like the smog was coming out from like China,
because like
and
because
LA
like
was being
people had
brighter.
videos of like raccoons walking around. And they're like, look, nature is healing. The raccoons are
Yeah,
going wild.
there was like three sheep in Dublin city center, and they're like, Ireland's healing. It's like Ireland is just it's already it's like moss. It's like just
Bro,
nature. There's fairies in Ireland.
I'll tell you one thing. In Poland, those wild boars, it doesn't matter what's pandemic or no, those wild boars just walk out in the middle of the city and like
Hell yeah.
everyone just has to get the F out of their way. They don't care.
Um, so that this was something that felt like was a real focus at the time. Now, as we posted on our YouTube shorts, and as something that is become apparent with what Trump is doing, he took us back out of the Paris Accords. So, in that, Trump made two executive orders, and the first one I want to talk about is the declaring a national energy emergency. That is Trump's rebuttal to Biden's focus on clean energy. He wants to start uh, going into our national resources. The very beginning says the energy and critical minerals identification, leasing, development, production, transportation, refining, what have you, of the United States are all far too inadequate to meet our nation's needs. Um, He goes on later to say the integrity and expansion of our nation's energy infrastructure from coast to coast is an immediate and pressing priority for the protection of the United States national and economic security. Um, so we're going to be mining. We're going to be going into our oil reserves and matching our Paris Accords. We're probably going to be looking less at inhibiting businesses from from expanding. He wants businesses to do what they can, and we're going to take the resources we already have here. Now, I don't know exactly what that will look like, but I'm going to refer to another project that I did in, I want to say, elementary school, maybe even middle school. The reason why I remember it is because it was about the Clearwater. Clearwater was an organization that became a festival in New York that my aunt used to do the books for, I believe. And it was about how the river in, oh my goodness, I have just forgotten the river and I'm looking it up. Uh but there was a river in New York.
Hudson?
The Hudson River. My goodness, dude. I had a complete brain fart. Thank you so much for your help.
Yes,
But the
thanks.
Hudson River, they were just dumping pollution in there, and the way that they were trying to get it out was to dredge and to like take a crane and just like pick pollution up off the ground, which would then unsettle the pollution and then would go back into the fishes and to the water streams instead of just settle at the bottom, which is still terrible. But this is what companies were doing unregulated. So now, if Trump is like, hey, we're just going to be taking oil, we're going to be taking gas, don't worry about the getting cleaner emissions, do what you need to so business can go forward, stuff like that's going to continue. And stuff
Well,
like that, or it's not going to continue, but restart. I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
Johnny, please go.
you could if you were so if you were anti inclined toward anti-imperialism, you could make the argument that drill baby drill and all of that sort of take our resources from our own backyard is will be a positive step towards the United States not doing that in other countries. So, for
Sure.
example, you may remember Elon Musk's famous tweet where he said, "We will coup whoever we want," uh, referring to Bolivia and the mining of is it what's the mineral they mine out of there for cell phones?
Oh, I know what you're talking. Cobalt?
Cobalt.
I
So
believe it's cobalt.
yeah. So I'm not saying that we have like a huge cobalt supply in the U.S. I have no idea,
Mhm.
but obviously, when we talk about big picture versus small picture, the executive orders are big picture. So Trump is like, I'm going to get everything we need out of our backyard instead of
Yes.
dealing with all these other countries. Okay, but what do we have? You know, we do have oil, and he's going to drill, baby, drill. And so part of me is sort of like, well, good, drill here, and don't rely on OPEC and all these other places, and
Sure.
don't ruin or mine here. Don't ruin other countries
That's a
or
good point.
you know.
A huge portion of our issues in the Middle East is that we were like, we want your oil reserves. And in the inauguration speech, Trump said America will be a manufacturing nation once again, which will be helpful for blue collar workers. And we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have. Okay. The largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth. And one of the places that he wants to start with, which is the last link I sent you, Johnny, is Alaska. And one of the executive orders is called Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential.
Bum bum bum.
So in section one, yeah, it's crazy.
Sorry, that's their Star Wars unleashing executive
So
action.
right at the top of section one, it says the state of Alaska holds an abundant and largely untapped supply of natural resources, including among others, energy. minerals, timber, and seafood.
Mm.
Seafood is the funniest portion of that.
I'm down,
Clearly,
man. Get me those Alaskan crab legs, man.
unlocking this bounty of natural wealth will raise the prosperity of our citizens while helping to enhance our nation's economic and national security for generations to come. We don't know what this is going to do. We don't know the types of pollution that this could bring into places, but like Johnny was just saying, this could give us the ability to stop fighting wars on other people's like we don't know. I don't know what we've been doing to the Middle East and their oil facilities and what havoc that's wreaked on their environment. Maybe it is better to ruin our own environment instead of someone else's.
Here's the thing to look out for with drill baby drill though, because this was an issue with other presidents. I think this line immediately caught my eye. Expedite the permitting and leasing of energy to natural resource projects in Alaska. So the federal government under Trump is going to put itself in the position of giving out more land, and that's going to create a demand for
Yes,
purchasing land in Alaska among the oil companies, which means potentially oil companies that are in good with the Trump administration will have an easier time than ones that aren't in good with the Trump administration,
of course.
or oil executives who take Trump administration officials and cabinet members on fancy trips and buy their hotel rooms. Would be like a good mark for this. We could end up with a situation like the Teapot Dome scandal under Warren Harding, where you have
Bribes.
people just making, yeah. Basically, they'll be like, so Halliburton's gonna thinking we want to buy all this land, and then this person they go to Pete Hegseth and they go, "How'd you like to be on the board of directors?" Like I by coincidence, and then we get the contract to drill. This actually happened. There was a German president who made a deal with Putin to build a giant pipeline between Russia and Germany. And then when he left the presidency, he took his seat as the head of the board of directors of that company that was building the pipeline. So I would keep an eye out in this issue for people who are going to be trying to make money off of
Absolutely.
leasing Alaskan land. I would say that that's a big, hey Randus, nice to see you.
Hello.
We're having a nonpartisan discussion about Trump's first week in office. Uh,
What's the last executive order that caught your eye, Johnny?
um, Voting.
Let's
Uh,
look at it.
yeah. Let's see. Oh, I got advancing equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals. It's so weird for me to see the word queer on a executive order, because it's just like, I don't know. It's a very hard to define concept, and I know a lot of people who identify as queer, and they're all great, whatever. But it's just like it's weird to see an official like recognition on a federal document of the word queer. I think that alone may have inspired Trump's reversal of that one. But I wanted to talk about promoting access to voting, because to me, this is one of the most poorly understood issues in the country. And an issue that automatically creates emotion.
Sure. Goodness. I think I lost Johnny. I don't know if you guys can see me or not. I'm a little worried.
Okay. I thought Cash Patel got us, but he's not confirmed yet.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. I was wondering what was going on.
so that said, okay. So this is one that Trump revoked again. Biden's executive order promoting access to voting, including for people of color, confronting obstacles to exercising the fundamental right to vote. Difficulties with voter registration, lack of information, barriers to access at polling places. So I have a complicated view on voting reform
I do
because
too.
you know that whenever you reform voting, you are changing the rules of a game that was already played 4 years ago, right? So 4 years ago, you played a game, and you know that in 4 years, you're going to play that game again. But in the 4 years between the first game and the second game, the winner is going to be changing the rules of the game so that by the time you get to the next round, the rules are not the same as the first time you played. And more than likely, the person who won the first time is going to change the rules to suit their own advantage. And so for a Democratic president to pass an executive order for a robust address of racial disparities in voting when the Democratic Party has, what, 80% Black support, like 70% Hispanic support, like minorities disproportionately support the Democratic Party, well, then, this naturally, at least temporarily, unless these communities change their mind, this is what appears to be a racial justice executive order may be a secret way for give yourself an advantage in future elections. And this has always been the problem with voting reform, because the first attempts at the federal government playing a robust role in registering people and protecting voter rights was at the end of the Civil War during Reconstruction. And at that time, you literally had all the Black people voted for the Republicans, all the white people voted for the Democrats. And most of the white people were not voting because they had participated in rebellion and weren't repatriated to the country yet. And the freed slaves were voting in large numbers and often, tipping the scales. And that's why all these states were Republican. These states that had no support for Republicans, like there was literally like that minority of Black people voting for them, and then the rest of the state was just like, no, like democratically, we do not want Republican rule here, and we consider the nation. And so the first attempts to like actively help Black people vote and be able to vote fairly were also disenfranchisement efforts against white voters. And so, it also hugely advantaged the Republicans. You jump to the next voting rights movement, which was Lyndon B. Johnson, and you had, a huge swing towards helping the Democrats in the 60s, although it didn't last because of Vietnam. Then you jump to today, and you have Biden winning with huge numbers in communities of color, and then he, suddenly makes one of the chief issues of his voting rights initiative to, have the government play an active role in ensuring that the rights of minorities are respected in voting. And this is at a time when voting is fundamentally changing. You have the pandemic, you have mail-in ballots are suddenly, you can just vote by mail. That was not the case in 2016. 2016 was the last election. I actually walked to a polling station demonstrating my commitment to vote. Like I walked there because it was like, all right, I'm going there and I'm going to vote to show that I care. And, the fact that I had to overcome some obstacles to get there kind of demonstrated how invested I was in voting. And so in that way, I kind of like earned my right to have a say. Whereas now you just wait for it to come in the mail, you fill it out, you send it in whenever. And it's sort of created a kind of, to me, it's created a situation where like it's not hard for people to vote anymore. I don't see why the government needs to actively pursue a robust and aggressive program to protect and enfranchise voters of color when voting's never been more accessible than now. I mean, unless the post office is not delivering the ballots to neighborhoods of color and things like that. But if everybody's getting their ballot by mail now and you can just fill it out, what is the need for this? It just seems like
It
it's
does.
it seems like it's kind of a virtue signal slash I mean, I guess okay, so some of these things like some of these things is clear why Trump overturned them. Promote and expand multilingual voter registration and election information, right? That goes to Trump's like the illegals are voting, which I don't know if that's true or not, but like if you're providing materials in Spanish, you're certainly if there is a problem with illegals voting and you're providing materials in Spanish, you know, you're helping that, which would go against Trump's sort of like they're bringing illegals in to vote against us, and the illegals are here to replace us as a workforce and as a voting bloc so that the Democrats can stay in power. Now, I don't believe in that, what I would call a conspiracy theory. Sometimes conspiracy theories are correct, but in this case, I don't think that there's a conspiracy to unseat Republicans by promoting illegals voting. But I don't know. Maybe some people in the comments have alternate information on that. But clearly, this is the product of I got cheated in 2020. Therefore, you know, I'm going to I have to remove all of Biden's election executive orders because I got cheated by Biden, and therefore everything Biden did on election reform was to institutionalize the cheating advantage that Democrats have. So Trump has to signal to the public that, you know, he's not going to continue any of Biden's voter rights sort of actions.
So this might be a little too tinfoily. Obviously, in history, there's always been more votes with every year. It has been this since, and I'm looking here. The biggest increase has looks like it's been since 1940. It's been this
Mm-hmm.
every year. More and more people come out to vote. As more and more people are able to vote, and also there's more people in the country. When you change the ability for certain people to vote, you get a result like this. In 2020, Biden received 81.2 million votes, and Trump received 74.2 million votes. In 2024, Kamala Harris received 75 million votes, and Trump received 77 million votes. So Trump went up by 3 million. But it is odd that about 8 million less people voted for Kamala than who voted in the previous administration. I don't know.
Well, I have a couple of reasons why I think that might be the case without the tinfoil hat. But if the tinfoil hat is correct, then feel free to comment and explain to me why the 2020 election was stolen. I would say that there was a few reasons why Harris fielded fewer votes than Biden. Number one, the 2020 election, everyone was sequestered at home, and the restrictions on mail-in balloting in many states, including the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania, they changed their laws to say in the past you had to explain why you needed a mail-in ballot, and then you got one and you could vote by mail. Like you had to say, I'm paralyzed, I can't leave the house.
Mhm.
In 2019, Pennsylvania legislature threw that out. Democrat legislature, mind you. and changed it to, if you want a mail-in ballot, you can get a mail-in ballot. And this completely changed the electoral strategy of the Democrats. Remember, Biden ran a basement campaign. He barely left his basement. So the Democrats basically were like telling everybody, get those mail-in ballots, and actively going and getting people to make sure that they get their mail-in ballot, vote by mail, vote by mail, vote by mail. And the Republicans were saying vote by mail is a conspiracy. So that a lot of Republicans didn't vote because they didn't vote by mail or whatever, and then they didn't go in on the day of. And then the other thing is that the Biden was, the former vice president under Obama. He was the only candidate in 2020 who had a name recognition that could rival Trump's. I wouldn't say more than Trump's, but could rival it, right? So he's
Sure.
the most famous name in the country other than Trump and Obama, let's say. And Obama can't run. And Biden is Obama, the next best thing, let's say, right?
I can't run. Yeah.
So Biden was like this choice for a lot of Americans. Biden was like this choice of like this comfort food choice. Like, let's just go back to the old Obama days with Uncle Joe. Whereas by this time this election came up, first of all, it was a mandate on Biden's presidency, which people had a low approval rating of. Number two is Biden's role in the first race, 2020, was a savior. His role in the second race was a saboteur and absolute destroyer. Like, he went down in flames this past summer. And so that set Kamala up really badly. And then I have to say, I give Kamala a lot of credit for the amount of votes she got, but her campaign was terrible. And I just did not see 80 million people getting all excited to vote for Kamala Harris the way that they, out of a sense of urgency, ran to their mailbox to vote for Biden to like save the country that was on fire, versus now the country's on fire, but it's because of them. And Trump comes back, somewhat vindicated in the eyes of a lot of people over the way that he left. The lawfare against him certainly helped him get this sort of Robin Hood image. And I just thought, like, people are going to vote for Trump more enthusiastically this time than they did the first time. I think the first time and the second time, people would be embarrassed to vote for him, wouldn't want to tell anybody unless they lived in, the Everglades or something where everyone had a Trump flag. Nobody wanted to say they voted for Trump. This time, like, people were like, hell yeah. I mean, Joe Rogan and all those endorsements and all those comedians and all these celebrities who came to him, as opposed to Harris, who was like, please, Dua Lipa or whoever, I don't know who she, please, booty shaking, generic pop star, please come shake your ass in front of Democratic, like, old ladies at a Democrat. I saw this one was like, this woman's like, oh yeah, bitch, I'm the queen. And there's this old, like, white lady who's like probably got involved during the Jimmy Carter years. And she's just like,
rip.
What's going on? Like, Harris was like was spending all this money and begging celebrities to campaign for her. Trump was just sitting there and they were coming to him. And it was just obvious that the wind was blowing so much harder behind Trump in this election, and that no way Harris was going to get anything near what Biden got. She didn't have the name recognition.
That's true. That's fair.
The way she entered the race was really shady. The Democrats had inflation, Gaza. I mean, it was a disaster. It was a total disaster.
It was an absolute disaster. Now, Johnny, in talking about how Donald got elected, how do you feel about his first week? To wrap up the show, baby, what are you thinking?
How do I rate his first week?
How do you rate? Yeah, in regular English, how do you rate Donnie Trump's first week here?
Okay.
First week back.
We're gonna try to rate Trump each week, and we're going to do it completely not on an we're going to totally not do it on an ideological basis. We're not going to do
Yes.
it based on our personal opinions. We're just going to say like, okay, sort of like, on the level of like handling the presidency and doing what you promised to do, and being effective. How did he do this week? And although I think that his aggressive start to the presidency could backfire if things go
Hmm.
wrong in the future, which is a huge possibility, I would give Trump an A on his first week as president
Whoa.
because he has successfully signaled to the majority of the American public the thing he wanted to signal to them, which is that the presidency is back after
Yeah.
a long vacancy in the form of Biden having dementia or whatever the case is, Biden being absent. I think that Trump has signaled to the country that the active presidency is back. He is at least signing a whole lot of executive orders that all are like his campaign promises, one after another. So he's signaling the country that he's not going to waste any time, that he's getting right into what he wants to do. And he wrapped up the week perfectly by going to survey the damage in North Carolina first, the red
Sure.
state, the redneck, and hanging out with all those like rednecks who were like, Mr. Trump, I lost 2 trucks. And Donald's like, yeah, you're wonderful. Give me a hug. Okay, get the hell away from me. But like he did a brilliant sort of like, he visited North Carolina, then he visited LA, and he
Yeah.
was like, I'll help you if you pass voter ID. And, you know, obviously keeping in account of, or keeping in mind the typical things that Trump does, um, to hurt himself. He didn't do a lot of those things this week. I've never seen Trump as a president be this popular in my entire life of knowing that Trump exists. So I don't see how you could give him a different grade on that level,
Oh,
even
you
if you hate
can't?
everything he does, than an A. But Connor, what is your
All
grade?
right.
A through F, you know.
I of course, and I don't think it would be fun if we fully agreed.
Mhm.
And I one of the things that I would like to say is that the president presides. They are the precedent. They are not a president, if that makes sense. They're the person that presides over the nation and makes sure
Mhm.
that they are doing the interest of the public. I
Sure.
prefer as fun as the big boys like Jefferson and who's the guy with the statue in the front of the White House? I'm blanking on his name. Trail of
Andrew
Tears man.
Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. As fun as strong presidents like that are, I prefer a president who does a lot less and waits and is calculated. A Polk, a Fillmore, John Adams the first. I like someone who is measured and takes a minute. Not like Biden, who did very little, but someone who takes a measured approach and slowly builds out what they're doing. So for me, as a bit of a pull from what Johnny said, I'm a little more worried on what will continue to happen. If I'm not willing to go back to an America where I have to watch the news every single day. So for me, I'm giving him a C plus because it's I'm certainly not giving him a fail. Where he's doing things, and some of the things are things that needed to get done. Some of the things that he said he was going to get done, and you have to judge him on that. But I do not love a heavy hand when it comes from the presidency. So for me personally, my grade is lower than Johnny's because am I would like a calmer, more measured Donald Trump going forward, and we will see what he does.
So I would just disagree with a couple of things he said in terms of Biden being a president, not being a president of action. I would say that Biden was equally, not equally, but I would say that he was a continuation in presidents being more active. I mean, he had a ton of
Okay.
executive orders, and I just think that
Sorry.
he became inactive in his last year. Like, right, basically, like April, May, June of 2024, I would say was the moment that Biden completely checked out and was
Okay.
lost. Um, Up to that point, I would say he was actually a very active. I mean, he modeled his presidency on FDR, and he got a lot of things passed and signed through the Congress. He wrote a lot of executive actions. I mean, these things that Trump are overturning, these were like, I mean, the government will actively pursue DEI and promote DEI. I mean, there's no president in history that, maybe you could say Lyndon Johnson, which Trump also overturned one of Lyndon Johnson's executive orders recently uh,
Incredible.
on free and fair employment, because that order said the government will actively promote diversity. So, I don't, you might agree with that goal, but that was not what the founding fathers had in mind for the country at all. I mean, they would have been like, the federal government is gonna
Sure.
promote diversity. That's like, they would just be thinking of terms of like, that's like similar to how a plumber's job is to fix the toilet, not to fix the electricity. The federal government's job is not to reach into everyone's life and make sure that they're hiring enough people of color or lesbians or like whatever. Like, this is like a huge breach of the ideas of free enterprise and the idea that the government doesn't reach in and get involved. So Trump overturned that, and it is what it is.
Hmm.
But I think that Biden was an incredibly active president. I also would just mention that Polk was also an incredibly active
All
president.
right.
I
All
think
right.
you're
Johnny's
thinking of,
coming after me.
I think you're thinking of like Calvin Coolidge or something like that, like a president who did very little.
Not a well, and then that's something we can discuss.
Yeah,
Comparing Biden to Coolidge or Coolidge to whomever. Um,
cool.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
we
thank you
are.
everyone for coming and
Yeah,
watching.
thanks so much. Yeah, thank you guys. Um, we are going to have daily shorts going up for the next 5 days, and that's
Hmm.
going to happen every week. And weekly streams here on the channel. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'll be back here next week with more updates on the Trump administration and what's new. And stay tuned also for new videos. I've got one about Trump and McKinley coming up.
Sounds
So,
good.
all right.
See you all then.
Love you guys. Bye.